Clara Weston dropped to her knees in the frozen mud, her infant son pressed against her chest. His cries so weak now, they barely made a sound. 6 other children huddled behind her, their faces blue from the cold, their bellies hollow for the 3rd day straight. The shopkeeper's wife had just thrown 3 pennies at her feet and called her children vermin. And Clara, a woman who had never begged for anything in her life, heard herself whisper, "Please, they're dying." That's when the wagon stopped. Bed. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel and follow Clara's journey to the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Clara's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the pennies. 3 pennies. That's what Mabel Hutchins thought her children's lives were worth. 3 pennies thrown in the mud like she was tossing scraps to a dog. "Pick 'em up," Mabel said, her voice sharp as the December wind. "Pick 'em up and get your filthy brood out of my sight." Clara didn't move. Couldn't move. The cold had seeped so deep into her bones that she wasn't sure her legs would hold her if she tried to stand. "Mama!" Elijah, her oldest at 12, stepped forward. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched at his sides. "Mama, let's go." "Listen to the boy," Mabel sneered. "At least one of your litter has some sense." "Don't." Clara's voice cracked. "Don't call them that." "I'll call them whatever I please. This is my store, my town. And you—" Mabel stepped closer, her breath fogging in the frigid air. "You're nothing but a burden. Your husband left you with 7 mouths to feed and not a penny to your name. That ain't my problem." Ruth, 10 years old and already too wise for her age, pulled her younger siblings closer. Thomas, Sarah, Benjamin, little Grace. All of them trembling. All of them silent. And in Clara's arms, baby Noah had stopped crying. That terrified her more than anything. "Please," Clara whispered. "Just some flour. Some milk for the baby. I'll work. I'll do anything. Anything." A new voice cut through the air, high and cold and dripping with contempt. Clara's stomach dropped. Cordelia Whitmore stood at the edge of the crowd that had gathered, her fur-lined coat pristine. Her gloved hands folded in front of her like she was attending a church social instead of watching a mother beg for her children's lives. "Did you hear that everyone—" Cordelia's voice carried across the square. "Clara Weston says she'll do anything. I wonder what her poor dead husband would think of that." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara felt something crack inside her chest. "My husband was a good man," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your husband was a drunk and a gambler who left you with nothing but debt and a house full of children you can't feed." Cordelia smiled, and it was the cruelest thing Clara had ever seen. "The apple doesn't fall far, does it? Tell me, Clara, which one of these children belongs to the man you were seen with last summer?" The crowd gasped, then murmured, then laughed again. "That's a lie." Clara's voice shook. "That's a filthy lie, and you know it." "Do I?" Cordelia took a step forward, her heels clicking on the frozen ground. "Because I seem to recall, Mama, make her stop." Little Sarah had started to cry. "Mama, please." Clara pulled herself to her feet. Her legs screamed in protest. Her body swaying from 3 days without food, but she stood. She stood because her children were watching. She stood because if she stayed on her knees one more second, she would shatter. "I don't know what I ever did to you," Clara said, meeting Cordelia's eyes. "But my children are innocent. They're cold, and they're hungry, and they haven't done a single thing wrong." Cordelia's smile didn't waver. "They were born. That's wrong enough." She turned to the crowd, spreading her arms like a preacher at a revival. "Good people of Silver Creek, I ask you, do we want women like this in our town? Women who can't control themselves, can't provide for their own children, come begging at our doors like common—" "That's enough." The voice was low, quiet, but it cut through Cordelia's speech like a knife through butter. Clara turned. A man stood at the edge of the square, tall, broad-shouldered. His black coat was dusted with snow, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Behind him a wagon waited 2 horses, stamping impatiently in the cold. Clara didn't recognize him. Or rather, she recognized of him the Kane Ranch was the largest spread in 3 counties, and Silas Kane was known as a man who kept to himself since his wife died. What she didn't understand was why he was here. Why he was looking at her like that. Silas Kane. Cordelia's voice had changed. Softer now. Almost sweet. What brings you to town? Supplies. He didn't look at Cordelia. His eyes were fixed on Clara. On her children. On the baby in her arms, who had gone so terribly, terribly still. Well, Cordelia laughed a little too brightly. As you can see, we're dealing with a bit of a situation here. Nothing that concerns. I said that's enough. Cordelia's mouth snapped shut. Silas Kane walked forward. The crowd parted for him like water around a stone. He stopped in front of Clara, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Up close, Clara could see the lines on his face, the gray at his temples, the way his jaw was set like he was holding back something fierce. Ma'am. His voice was gravel and smoke. How long since these children ate? Clara's throat closed up. She couldn't lie to those eyes, dark and steady and seeing right through her. 3 days, she whispered. I tried. I've been trying. 3 days. He repeated it flatly. Then he turned to Mabel Hutchins, who was still standing in the doorway of her store. You turned away a woman with 7 hungry children in the dead of winter. She can't pay, Mabel sputtered. I run a business, not a charity. How much does she owe? Mabel blinked. What? The debt. How much? Well, $12 I reckon, but... Silas Kane reached into his coat and pulled out a leather billfold. He counted out bills without looking at them and held them out to Mabel. 20. That covers the debt and whatever supplies she needs today. Put together a box. Flour, sugar, salt. Bacon, beans, coffee. Milk for the baby. And be quick about it. Mabel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I'm Mr. Kane. I don't think you understand. I understand fine. His voice dropped, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I understand you were about to let children starve in the street 2 weeks before Christmas. Now, are you going to get those supplies, or do I need to take my business elsewhere permanently? Mabel practically ran back into her store. The crowd had gone silent. Even Cordelia seemed frozen, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Silas Kane turned back to Clara. Ma'am, he said, quieter now. Can your boy walk? Clara didn't understand the question. What? Your oldest. Can he walk to the wagon? Elijah stepped forward, chin up, shoulders back. I can walk anywhere, sir. Something flickered across Silas Kane's face. Something that might have been respect. Good. Take your brothers and sisters to the wagon. There are blankets in the back. Get them warm. Wait. Clara found her voice. Wait. I can't accept. You can, and you will. Silas looked at her, and his voice softened just a fraction. Ma'am, I don't know what happened to you. I don't know your story, and I ain't asking. But I know what hungry children look like. I know what a mother at the end of a rope looks like. And I ain't about to stand here and watch while this town tears you apart. But why? The word came out broken, desperate. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you? Because someone should. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Ruth had already started leading the younger children toward the wagon. Thomas was carrying Benjamin, and Sarah had little Grace by the hand. Only Elijah remained watching Silas Kane with an expression Clara couldn't read. Mama. Elijah's voice was careful, measured. I think we should go with him. Clara looked at her son, 12 years old and already carrying the weight of a man, already trying to protect her, protect all of them in a world that had given them nothing but cruelty. Eli? He paid our debt, Mama. He's giving us food. And the baby? Elijah's voice cracked. Mama Noah needs milk. He needs to get warm. We can figure out the rest later, but right now, the boy's right. Silas Kane's voice was gentle. Whatever questions you've got, whatever worries they'll keep. But your children can't wait. Get in the wagon, ma'am, please. Clara looked around the square, at the faces of the people she had known for years. People who had come to her wedding. People who had brought food when her husband died. People who were now staring at her like she was something unclean. Cordelia Whitmore stood apart from the crowd, her face twisted with rage. "You're making a mistake, Silas," she called out. "Taking in a woman like that, people will talk." Silas Kane didn't even turn around. "Let them. I'm warning you." "No, ma'am." Now he did turn, and his voice was ice. "Let me be clear. You don't warn me about anything. You don't speak to me. You don't speak about me. And if I hear one more word about this woman or her children coming from your mouth, you and I are going to have a problem. Do we understand each other?" Cordelia's face went white, then red. Then she spun on her heel and marched away, her boots striking the frozen ground like gunshots. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Some shot. Clara looks of pity, others looks of disgust. Most just seemed relieved that the spectacle was over. Mabel Hutchins emerged from her store with a large wooden crate. She set it in the wagon without a word, her eyes firmly fixed on the ground. "Thank you kindly," Silas said, and there was no warmth in it. He offered his hand to Clara. She stared at it. This stranger's hand, calloused and strong and steady. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't repay you. I have nothing." "Didn't ask for repayment. Then what do you want?" The question came out sharper than she intended. But she was tired, so tired, and she had learned the hard way that kindness from strangers always came with a price. Silas Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough around the edges, like he wasn't used to saying words like this out loud. "I've got a ranch, big one. House has been empty since my wife passed 4 years ago. It's got room, more than enough room for 7 children and their mother." He paused. "I'm offering you work, cooking, cleaning, keeping the house running. In exchange, you and your children get a roof over your heads and food in your bellies. That's all." "That's all," Clara repeated. "That's all." She searched his face for any sign of a lie, any hint of ulterior motive. But all she found was a bone-deep exhaustion that mirrored her own. A loneliness that seemed to seep out of him like cold from a stone. "Why me?" she asked. "There are other women who need work. Women without—" She almost said baggage, but the word died in her throat. Her children were not baggage. They were everything. "Because you're the one standing here," Silas said simply. "And because when that woman threw those pennies at you, you didn't pick them up. You stood. Even when you had nothing left, you stood." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back hard. "I don't even know you," she said. "No, ma'am, you don't. But I reckon we've got time to fix that." From the wagon, Ruth's voice carried through the cold air. "Mama Noah's awake. He's crying for milk." Clara's heart lurched. Her baby was crying. That meant he was alive. That meant he was fighting. She looked at Silas Kane's outstretched hand one more time. Then she took it. The ride to the ranch was long and quiet. Clara sat in the back of the wagon with her children piled around her, wrapped in blankets that smelled like cedar and smoke. Elijah sat up front with Silas, his back straight, his eyes scanning the horizon like he was keeping watch. Ruth had taken charge of the younger ones, as she always did. She'd gotten Noah to take some milk. Silas had packed a small bottle already warmed, and the baby was sleeping. Now his tiny fist curled against Clara's chest. Thomas sat silent and watchful, his arms wrapped around his knees. Sarah had fallen asleep against Ruth's shoulder, and Benjamin and Grace were playing some quiet game with their fingers, too tired to be properly energetic. Clara watched the white landscape roll by and tried not to think. Tried not to think about what she was doing. Tried not to think about what the town would say. Tried not to think about the look on Cordelia Whitmore's face, or the way the sheriff had watched from across the square without lifting a finger. Tried not to think about what Silas Kane might want from her despite his words. "Ma'am." She startled. Silas had turned his head slightly, addressing her over his shoulder. "Yes. There's hot coffee in the basket by your feet. Should still be warm. Might help." Clara found the basket, found the tin cup, poured the coffee with shaking hands. The first sip sent warmth spreading through her chest, and she had to close her eyes against the sudden threat of tears. "Thank you," she managed. Silas nodded and turned back to the road. Elijah glanced at his mother, then at Silas. After a moment he spoke. "Sir." "Yeah. Back there. When you told that woman, Mrs. Whitmore, when you told her not to speak about my mother. You meant it." Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't say things I don't mean." Elijah absorbed this. "She's powerful, Mrs. Whitmore. She owns half the businesses in town. Pa used to say she could ruin anyone she wanted." "Your pa was right. But you still—" "I still—" Silas's voice was flat. "I don't answer to Cordelia Whitmore. Don't answer to anyone in that town. Haven't for years. They can talk all they want. Words don't keep cattle fed or fences mended." Elijah was silent for a long time. Then quietly, "My pa tried to stand up to people like her. Once. Didn't go well." "What happened?" "Lost his job at the mill. Had to take work at the mines instead." Elijah paused. "That's where he died." Clara's breath caught. She hadn't known Elijah understood so much about what had happened. Had thought she'd protected him from the worst of it. She should have known better. Children always understood more than you thought. Silas didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was different, softer somehow. "I'm sorry about your pa. Didn't know him. No." "Then why are you sorry?" Silas glanced back at Elijah, and something passed between them that Clara couldn't quite name. "Because you're 12 years old and you're sitting up here like a man," Silas said. "Because you're asking the right questions and watching out for your family when you should be playing in the snow and raising hell like boys your age are supposed to." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Someone's got to." "Yeah," Silas said quietly. "Someone does. But it ain't supposed to be you, not yet." They rode in silence after that. The ranch appeared out of the snow like a ghost. Clara had expected something rough and weathered, but the house was solid, well-maintained, with smoke already curling from the chimney. Behind it stretched barns and outbuildings, and miles of fenced land, all of it blanketed in white. "It's big," Ruth breathed. "Got room," Silas said simply. He brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down. "Elijah helped me with the supplies. Ladies head on inside. Doors unlocked. Fires lit." Clara hesitated. "You were expecting us." Silas shook his head. "I was expecting to come home to an empty house, same as always. Fires for me." He paused. "But I reckon it'll stretch." Clara climbed down from the wagon, Noah stirring in her arms. The other children followed, stumbling a little on their frozen legs. "Go on," Silas said, not unkindly. "Get warm. I'll bring in the supplies." Clara gathered her children and walked toward the door. She stopped on the threshold and looked back. Silas was unloading the crate from the wagon, and Elijah was struggling to help, his thin arms straining with the weight. Without a word, Silas shifted the crate so Elijah was carrying the lighter end. A small thing. A nothing thing. But Clara saw her son stand a little taller, and something in her chest cracked open just a little. "Mama?" Ruth's voice was uncertain. "Should we go in?" Clara turned to her daughter, 10 years old, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "Let's go in." She pushed open the door and stepped into the warmth. The fire was blazing in a stone hearth, and the house smelled like wood smoke and coffee, and something Clara couldn't identify, but that felt almost like home. The children spread out cautiously, their eyes wide. Grace immediately toddled toward the fire, and Ruth caught her just in time, pulling her back. "Careful, sweet pea. Hot." "Hot," Grace repeated solemnly. Sarah and Benjamin had found a worn rug near the hearth and sat down on it together, pressing close for warmth. Thomas was examining the bookshelves that lined one wall, his face hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. Clara stood in the middle of the room, holding Noah, trying to understand what was happening. Trying to understand how she had gone from begging in the snow to standing in this house warm and solid and full of light. The door opened behind her. Silas entered, carrying the crate, Elijah close behind. "Kitchen's through there," Silas said, nodding toward a doorway. "Should be everything you need to make supper. If not, tell me and I'll get it." "Supper," Clara repeated like she'd forgotten what the word meant. "Yes, ma'am. Supper." Silas set down the crate and straightened up. "I expect you know your way around a kitchen, and I expect those children are hungry enough to eat a horse. So." He didn't say anything else, just nodded once and headed for the door. "Wait," Clara called. "Where are you going?" "Barn. Animals need tending. I'll be back in an hour or so." He paused at the door and looked at her. "Make yourselves at home, Mrs. Weston. For tonight at least, this is where you belong." And then he was gone. Clara stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. "Mama." Ruth's voice was small. "Is this real?" Clara looked at her children. All 7 of them scattered around this stranger's house, their faces reflecting the firelight. "I don't know, baby," she said honestly. "But for right now, let's pretend it is. Let's pretend we're safe." She walked into the kitchen, set Noah in a makeshift basket by the warm stove, and began to prepare the first real meal her children would eat in 3 days. And if her hands shook the whole time, well, that was between her and God. Supper was quiet. Clara had made a simple stew from the supplies, stretching everything as far as it would go out of habit. But when she set the pot on the table and saw her children's faces, she realized she didn't need to stretch anything tonight. There was enough. For the first time in months, there was enough. "Can we really eat all of this?" Benjamin asked, his eyes wide as saucers. "Yes, baby, eat." The children didn't need to be told twice. They fell on the food like wolves, and Clara had to remind them twice to slow down, to chew, to breathe. Ruth helped Grace with her spoon, and Thomas made sure Benjamin got his fair share before taking any seconds himself. Elijah sat apart from the others, eating slowly, his eyes on the door. "He ain't coming in," Clara said softly. "Who?" "Mr. Kane. He's still in the barn. I saw the lantern." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Why?" "I don't know." "Seems strange. Man brings us all the way out here, gives us his house, his food, and then hides in the barn. Maybe he's not hiding." Clara set down her spoon. "Maybe he's giving us space. Or maybe he's planning something." "Elijah, I'm just saying, Mama, nobody does something for nothing. Pa always said—" "Your pa said a lot of things." The words came out sharper than Clara intended. She softened her voice. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But right now we're warm and we're fed, and your brother is sleeping with a full belly for the first time in weeks. Let's take that. For tonight." Elijah looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded and went back to eating. The door opened. Silas Kane stepped inside, stomping snow from his boots. He stopped when he saw them all at the table, and something flickered across his face. Something Clara couldn't quite name. "Smells good," he said gruffly. "There's plenty left." Clara stood. "I can fix you a plate." "I'll fix it myself. Sit. Eat." He moved past her to the kitchen, and Clara heard the sounds of him dishing up stew, pouring coffee. When he came back, he didn't sit at the table with them. He sat in the chair by the fire, his back to the room. Ruth exchanged a glance with Clara. Clara shook her head slightly. Not now. They finished supper in silence. Afterward, Clara put the younger children to bed. Silas had shown her the bedrooms upstairs, 3 of them more than enough space. The children doubled up exhausted and were asleep before their heads hit the pillows. When Clara came back downstairs, Silas was still in the chair by the fire. Elijah sat across from him, and something in the air told Clara she had walked into the middle of a conversation. "Everything all right?" she asked carefully. "Fine." Silas didn't turn. "Your boy here was asking questions." Clara's heart stuttered. "Elijah." "It's all right." Silas finally turned his head. "He's got a right. You both do." "What questions?" Clara asked. Elijah spoke up. "I asked him why he lives alone. What happened to his family?" Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "Elijah, that's not—" "I told him." Silas's voice was flat. "Told him my wife died. Told him the baby died with her. Told him I've been alone ever since because I couldn't stand the thought of anyone else in this house." The fire crackled in the silence. "Then why us?" Elijah pressed. "Why bring us here if you can't stand people?" "Eli, enough." "No." Silas held up a hand. "Let him ask. Boy's protecting his family. That's what men do." He stood slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the darkness. 4 years ago, my wife Sarah went into labor during a storm. Worst blizzard this territory had seen in 20 years. Doctor couldn't get through. Midwife was drunk. By the time morning came... He stopped, swallowed. "By the time morning came, I was digging 2 graves instead of building a cradle." Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. "I buried them under the oak tree out back. Same place I married her." Silas's voice was rough as sandpaper. "After that, I didn't much care about living. Kept working because that's all I knew. Kept breathing because my body wouldn't stop. But I wasn't alive. Hadn't been for years." He turned to face them. "Then I saw your mother in that square. Saw those people treating her like garbage. Saw those children." His voice cracked. Just for a second. "Saw those children and something in me remembered what it felt like to give a damn." Elijah stared at him. "That's it. That's the whole reason." "That's it. You don't want anything else." Silas's eyes hardened. "I know what you're asking, boy. And the answer is no. Your mother is safe here. Her honor is safe. I ain't that kind of man, and I won't have you thinking I am. Clear?" Elijah held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Yes, sir." "Clear." Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "It's late," Silas said. "There's a room at the end of the hall for you, Mrs. Weston. Clean sheets. Door locks from the inside." He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. "I'll be in the barn." "The barn?" Clara stepped forward. "Mr. Kane, it's freezing." "I've slept in worse." "Good night, ma'am." And he was gone. Clara stood there staring at the closed door, her mind spinning. "Mama." Elijah's voice was quieter now, younger. "Do you believe him?" Clara thought about the way Silas had looked at the children, the way he'd shifted that crate so Elijah could help carry it, the way his voice had cracked when he talked about his wife. "Yes," she said softly. "I believe him. What do we do now?" Clara turned to her son, 12 years old, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Now we sleep," she said. "And tomorrow we figure out the rest." The next morning came too fast. Clara woke to the sound of a wagon approaching. She was on her feet before she was fully awake, her heart pounding her first thought for the children. She ran to the window and felt her stomach drop. Sheriff Holt Brennan was riding up the path, and behind him came 2 other wagons. Cordelia Whitmore sat in the first one wrapped in furs, her face set in grim What's happening? Take your brothers and sisters upstairs. Lock the door. Don't come out until I say. But, now Ruth, go. Ruth hesitated only a second. Then she was gone, and Clara heard her footsteps racing up the stairs, heard her gathering the children with urgent whispers. Clara grabbed her shawl and stepped onto the porch just as the sheriff reached the house. Mrs. Weston. Sheriff Brennan touched his hat. His voice was civil, but his eyes were cold. We need to speak with you. About what? About the children. Clara's blood turned to ice. My children are none of your concern. I'm afraid they are. Cordelia Whitmore descended from her wagon with the help of a man Clara didn't recognize. You see, Mrs. Weston, after your little display in town yesterday, several concerned citizens brought certain matters to the attention of the church and the court. What matters? Your fitness as a mother, for one. Cordelia's smile was poison. Your moral character, your ability to provide, the fact that you've now taken up residence in the home of an unmarried man. I work for Mr. Kane. It's a respectable arrangement. Is it? Cordelia raised an eyebrow. The court may see it differently. An unmarried woman living with an unmarried man with 7 impressionable children under the same roof. She shook her head in mock sorrow. It simply isn't proper. You can't take my children. Oh, but we can. Sheriff Brennan pulled a folded paper from his coat. I've got a court order here signed by Judge Patterson himself. Gives us the authority to remove the children from your care pending an investigation into their welfare. Clara's knees nearly buckled. No. No, you can't. Where are the children, Mrs. Weston? They're not here. We heard movement inside. Brennan stepped forward. I'll ask you once more. Where are the children? Step back from her. Clara whirled around. Silas Kane stood at the corner of the house, a rifle in his hands. He wasn't pointing it at anyone. Not yet. But the message was clear. Kane. The sheriff's hand moved to his holster. This ain't your business. She's on my land. That makes it my business. We've got a legal order. I don't care if you've got a letter from the president himself. Silas walked forward, placing himself between Clara and the sheriff. You ain't taking those children. Silas. Cordelia's voice was silky. Think about what you're doing. Harboring this woman, threatening an officer of the law. I ain't threatening anyone, yet. Silas's voice was deadly calm. But if any of you take one more step toward this house, that'll change. You'd shoot the sheriff. I'd shoot anyone who tried to take children from their mother. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then the door opened and Clara's heart stopped. Elijah stepped onto the porch, positioning himself beside Silas. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. Elijah, no. Clara reached for him. My brothers and sisters stay with my mother, Elijah said. His voice cracked, but he didn't back down. You want to take them? You go through me first. And me. Thomas appeared in the doorway, 11 years old and shaking like a leaf, but standing. And me, said Ruth, pushing past her brothers to stand on Clara's other side. Behind her, Sarah held Benjamin's hand, and Benjamin held Grace's, a chain of children forming a wall in front of the house. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Her children. Her brave, foolish, wonderful children. This is ridiculous, Cordelia snapped. Sheriff, do your duty. But Sheriff Brennan was staring at the children. Something in his face had shifted. Something human. Mrs. Whitmore, he said slowly, maybe we should... I said do your duty. And I'm telling you. Brennan turned to face her, and there was steel in his voice now. I'm telling you that I didn't sign up to drag children screaming from their mother's arms. That ain't law. That's cruelty. Cordelia's face went white with rage. You work for me, Brennan. No, ma'am. I work for this county, and this county ain't in the business of traumatizing children because you've got a grudge. He turned to Clara. Ma'am, I apologize for the disturbance. This matter needs more investigation before anyone takes any action. We'll be going now." "Sheriff Brennan," Cordelia started. "We'll be going now." Brennan mounted his horse and tipped his hat to Silas. "Kane." "Ma'am." He rode away without looking back. Cordelia stood in the yard trembling with fury. Her eyes swept over Clara, over the children, and finally landed on Silas. "This isn't over," she said. "Not by a long shot." "It is for today." Silas didn't lower his rifle. "Get off my land, Cordelia, and don't come back." For a moment, Clara thought Cordelia might refuse. But then she turned, climbed into her wagon, and drove away in a spray of snow and silence. Clara's legs gave out. She would have hit the ground if Silas hadn't caught her, his arms strong around her waist, holding her up. "Easy," he said. "Easy. It's over." "They'll come back." Clara was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "They'll come back with more men, more papers. Then we'll deal with it. You don't understand. Cordelia has money. She has power. She can do anything she wants. She can try." Silas turned Clara to face him, his hands steady on her shoulders. "Listen to me. I've faced down rustlers, outlaws, and a whole company of Union soldiers. Cordelia Whitmore don't scare me. But, no buts. You and your children are under my protection now. That means something. That means everything." His eyes held hers. "You hear me, Clara?" It was the first time he'd used her given name. Clara nodded, unable to speak. "Good." He released her and turned to the children. "Elijah, Thomas, help me with the chores. Ladies, get inside where it's warm. We've got work to do." And just like that, life went on. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Mornings, Clara cooked breakfast while Silas and the older boys tended to the animals. Ruth helped with the younger children, getting them dressed and fed, while Clara cleaned and organized. Afternoons, Silas worked the ranch while Clara managed the house, and evenings they all sat down to supper together. It was strange at first. Silas barely spoke during meals, preferring to listen while the children chattered about their day. But Clara noticed things, small things. The way he always made sure there was wood for the fire before Clara woke. The way he carved a wooden horse for Benjamin when he saw the boy playing with a stick. The way he taught Elijah how to saddle a horse properly, patient and steady, never raising his voice. One evening, Clara found Grace asleep in Silas's lap. She stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. Silas sat frozen in the chair, his large hands awkward and uncertain, like he was holding something made of glass. "She just climbed up," he said. "I didn't know what to do." Clara smiled for the first time in what felt like years. "You're doing fine." "I ain't moved in 20 minutes. I think my leg's asleep." "Welcome to parenthood, Mr. Kane." Something flickered in his eyes at that. Something that might have been pain, might have been longing. "I should put her to bed," Clara said quickly. "No." Silas's voice was soft. "Let her sleep. She's comfortable." Clara hesitated, then sat down across from him. The fire crackled between them. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Depends what it is." "Why did you never remarry after Sarah?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant. "Tried once. Courted a woman from town about 2 years back. Nice enough lady. Good cook. Would have made a fine wife." "What happened?" "She came out to the ranch one day, saw the graves under the oak tree, asked if I'd move them." He shook his head. "Said it wasn't proper having my dead wife buried in the front yard. Said she couldn't start a new life with Sarah's ghost watching." Clara's heart clenched. "Oh." "I told her to leave. Told her Sarah and my son would stay right where they were until the day I died. Told her any woman who couldn't understand that wasn't the woman for me." He looked down at Grace, still sleeping peacefully in his arms. "Haven't courted anyone since." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I made my choice." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What about you? What about me?" "Your husband. How long since he passed? Clara felt the familiar ache in her chest. 2 years. Almost 3 now. How'd he die? Mining accident. Collapse in the silver mine outside of Silver Creek. She swallowed hard. He wasn't supposed to be working that day. He'd been fired from the mill a month before. Cordelia's doing. He took the mine job because no one else would hire him. Silas's jaw tightened. Cordelia. She wanted our land. Small plot, nothing special, but it bordered her property. Daniel wouldn't sell, so she ruined him. Clara's voice was bitter. After he died, she bought the land from the bank for 1/4 of what it was worth, left me and the children with nothing but his debts. And no one helped you. Who would help? The whole town is afraid of her. Anyone who speaks up ends up like Daniel. Out of work, out of options. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. I held on as long as I could, took in washing, mending, whatever I could find. But 7 children. She shook her head. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then carefully, so as not to wake Grace, he reached out and took Clara's hand. It's enough now, he said. Clara felt something break open in her chest. Something that had been locked tight for years. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Really? Silas didn't answer right away. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, gentle and slow. Because when I look at you, he said finally, I see someone who never stopped fighting, even when everything was taken from you, even when the whole world was against you. You kept going. You kept your children together. You kept them alive. He paused. I know what it's like to lose everything, Clara. But I didn't keep fighting. I gave up. I let the grief swallow me whole. He looked at her with eyes that held a depth of pain she was only beginning to understand. You showed me that there's another way. You showed me that it's possible to keep living even when living hurts. Clara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I ain't asking for anything, Silas continued. I meant what I said before, but I want you to know. You're not just hired help to me, not anymore. You're... He struggled for the words. Your family, you and those children, if you want to be. A tear slipped down Clara's cheek. Then another. Silas, she whispered. Before she could say anything else, the door burst open. Elijah stood there breathless, his face white with fear. Someone's coming. A lot of someone's. And they've got torches. Silas was on his feet in an instant. Grace gathered carefully in his arms. He handed the sleeping child to Clara and grabbed his rifle from above the mantel. How many? He asked. I counted at least 10. Maybe more. Stay here. All of you. Silas. Clara caught his arm. Don't go out there alone. I ain't planning to get myself killed, Clara. But I ain't gonna let them burn my home either. He looked at her, and there was something fierce in his eyes. Lock the doors. Keep the children upstairs. Whatever happens, don't come out. Promise me you'll come back. Silas paused. For a moment he looked at her like he wanted to say something more, something important. Instead, he just nodded. I promise. Then he was gone. The door slamming shut behind him, leaving Clara alone with her terror and her children and the sound of torches crackling in the dark. Clara's hands shook as she gathered the children. Upstairs, she whispered. All of you. Now. Mama, what's happening? Sarah's voice trembled. Who are those people? Never mind. Ruth, take your brothers and sisters to the back bedroom. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone except me or Mr. Kane. But Mama, do as I say. Ruth nodded, her face pale, and herded the younger children up the stairs. Elijah didn't move. I'm staying, he said. Elijah, no. I'm not a child, Mama. I can help. You're 12 years old. And Pa was dead at 32. Age don't mean nothing out here. Elijah's jaw was set, his eyes fierce. Mr. Kane is out there alone. He needs someone watching his back. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to lock him upstairs with the others where he'd be safe. But she looked at her son, at the man he was becoming, and something in her broke. "Stay by the window," she said. "Don't go outside. If something happens to me or Mr. Kane, you take your brothers and sisters and run. You hear me? You run, and you don't look back." "Mama." "Promise me, Elijah." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I promise." Clara grabbed a kitchen knife and moved to the front window. Through the frost-covered glass she could see the torches bobbing in the darkness, coming closer. And Silas standing alone in the yard, his rifle raised. "That's far enough." His voice carried through the cold night air. The mob stopped. Clara counted 12 men, maybe more. Some she recognized from town. Others were strangers. One man stepped forward, Marcus Webb, Cordelia's foreman. A big man with a cruel mouth and hands like sledgehammers. "Evening, Kane," Webb said. "Nice night for a fire." "State your business and get off my land." "Our business is that woman you've got in there." Webb spat on the ground. "Mrs. Whitmore says she's a danger to the community. Says those children need to be removed for their own safety." "Mrs. Whitmore can go to hell." Webb laughed. "Big talk from one man against 12. I only count 11. One of you boys hiding behind the others." Something shifted in the crowd. Clara saw it, the nervous glances, the shuffling feet. These weren't hardened criminals. They were farmers, shopkeepers, men who'd been paid or pressured into something they didn't fully understand. "Look," Webb said, his voice hardening. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. You hand over the woman and the kids, nobody gets hurt. You refuse." He held up his torch. "Things get ugly. You're threatening to burn my home with children inside. I'm telling you how it's gonna be." Silas didn't respond. He just shifted his rifle, and the click of the hammer being cocked echoed across the yard. "First man who moves toward this house dies," he said calmly. "Second man dies too. Third man I might miss, but probably not. Now I've got 18 rounds and there's 12 of you. Anyone want to do the math?" No one moved. "Didn't think so." Webb's face twisted with rage. "You can't shoot all of us." "Maybe not, but I can definitely shoot you." Silas leveled the rifle at Webb's chest. "You want to be first, go ahead. Take a step." The silence stretched. Clara could hear her own heartbeat loud as thunder in her ears. Then a voice came from the back of the mob. "This ain't right, Marcus." Webb whirled around. "Who said that?" A young man stepped forward. Clara recognized him. Tom Harris, the blacksmith's apprentice. He couldn't have been more than 19. "I said this ain't right." Tom's voice was shaking, but he didn't back down. "I came here because Mrs. Whitmore said we was protecting children. But this ain't protecting nobody. This is murder." "Shut your mouth, boy." "No." Tom threw his torch on the ground and stamped it out. "I didn't sign up to burn children alive. I didn't sign up to kill a man for taking in a widow. This is wrong and you know it. You think Cordelia's gonna let you walk away?" Webb's voice was dangerous. "You think she's gonna forget this?" "I don't care what she does." Tom looked at the other men. "Come on. How many of you got wives, children? How would you feel if it was your family in there?" The men exchanged glances. One by one, torches began to drop. "Pick those up!" Webb shouted. "Pick them up, you cowards!" But the men were already backing away. One of them, an older man, Clara recognized as Jeb Hawkins from the general store, shook his head slowly. "The boy's right," Jeb said. "This ain't what I signed on for. I'm going home." He turned and walked away into the darkness. Others followed. Within minutes, only Webb and 3 others remained. "You'll regret this," Webb snarled at the departing men. "All of you Mrs. Whitmore will make you pay." "Then she'll have to go through me," Silas said. Webb turned back to face him, his face contorted with fury. "This ain't over, Kane. Not by a long shot." "It is for tonight. Now get off my land before I lose my patience." For a moment, Clara thought Webb might charge. His hand twitched toward the gun at his hip, and she saw Silas's finger tighten on the trigger. Then Webb spat on the ground and turned away. "Let's go," he muttered to his remaining men. "She wants this done right. She can do it herself." They melted into the darkness, taking their torches with them. Clara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her legs gave out, and she slid down the wall, the knife clattering from her nerveless fingers. The door opened. Silas stood in the doorway, his face haggard, his rifle still in his hands. "It's over," he said. "They're gone." Clara couldn't speak, couldn't move. The terror of the last few minutes crashed over her like a wave, and she started to shake. Silas crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her. "Clara, Clara, look at me." She raised her eyes to his face. "You're safe," he said. "The children are safe. I promised you, didn't I? You could have died." Her voice was barely a whisper. "They could have killed you. But they didn't. Silas. They didn't." He reached out and took her hands in his. His grip was warm and steady, an anchor in the storm. "I'm here. I'm right here." Footsteps thundered on the stairs. Ruth appeared, her face white, the younger children crowded behind her. "Mama, Mama, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, baby, I'm fine." The children rushed to her, surrounding her in a tangle of arms and tears. Grace was crying. Benjamin was asking questions that no one could answer. Thomas stood apart, his face too old for 11, watching Silas with something like awe. "Mr. Kane," Thomas said quietly, "you really would have shot them." Silas met the boy's eyes. "To protect your family. Yes, I would have. Why, we're not yours." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara, at the children gathered around her, at the life that had filled his empty house. "Maybe not by blood," he said, "but blood ain't everything." Clara felt fresh tears streaming down her face, but these weren't tears of fear. They were tears of something else entirely. The night was long. Silas kept watch by the window while Clara put the children to bed. They didn't want to sleep, couldn't sleep, kept asking questions about the men with torches and why people wanted to hurt them. Clara had no answers. She held them close, sang the lullabies she remembered from her own childhood, and prayed that the morning would bring peace. It didn't. Sheriff Brennan arrived just after dawn alone. This time his face grim. "Mrs. Weston? Kane." "Sheriff," Silas's voice was cold. "Come to finish what your friend started. I ain't got nothing to do with what happened last night." Brennan removed his hat and held it in his hands. "I heard about it this morning. Webb and his boys are in the saloon bragging about how they taught you a lesson." "Teaching a lesson? Is that what they're calling it?" "I'm sorry, Kane. I truly am. But there's something else." Brennan swallowed hard. "Mrs. Whitmore filed a formal complaint with Judge Patterson this morning. She's claiming that Mrs. Weston is an unfit mother and that the children are in immediate danger." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "No. There's going to be a hearing. 3 days from now. The judge will decide whether to remove the children from your custody." "On what grounds?" Silas demanded. "Living in sin, moral turpitude, inability to provide." Brennan shook his head. "It's all horse manure, but Patterson owes Cordelia money. Half the town owes Cordelia money. She's got him in her pocket." "So that's it?" Clara's voice rose. "She gets to take my children because she's rich. I'm telling you what's coming so you can prepare. Find a lawyer, find witnesses, find anyone who'll speak on your behalf." Brennan looked at them both. "It ain't gonna be easy. Most folks are too scared of Cordelia to cross her. But not you." Brennan was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed. "I got a daughter about your Ruth's age. Sweet girl. Good heart." He met Clara's eyes. "If someone tried to take her from me over lies and politics, I'd burn the world down. I reckon you feel the same. Then help us." "I can't. Not officially, but I can tell you this. He lowered his voice. Cordelia ain't as powerful as she thinks. She's got enemies. People she's wronged same as you. Find them. Get them to talk. He put his hat back on. 3 days, Mrs. Weston. Make them count. He touched his hat and rode away. Clara turned to Silas, desperation clawing at her chest. What do? We do what he said. We find people willing to stand up. Who everyone's afraid of her? Not everyone. Silas's jaw tightened. There's someone I need to see, someone who might know things about Cordelia that could help. Who? Her husband's brother, Edgar Whitmore. He lives about 20 miles east, runs a small spread near the mountains. Silas grabbed his coat. He and Cordelia had a falling out after his brother died. She cheated him out of his inheritance, left him with nothing but scrubland. And you think he'll help? I think he hates her almost as much as we do. Clara followed him to the door. I'm coming with you. Clara, those are my children she's trying to take. I'm not sitting here waiting while someone else fights my battles. She grabbed her shawl. Ruth can watch the little ones for a few hours. Elijah too. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. All right. But we ride fast, and we don't stop. The ride was hard and cold. Clara hadn't been on a horse since Daniel died, and her body protested every step. But she pushed through the pain, focusing on the rhythm of the hooves on the man riding beside her, on the faces of her children waiting at home. They reached Edgar Whitmore's ranch by mid-morning. It wasn't much a small cabin, with a sagging roof, a few scraggly cattle, and a barn that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. Nothing like Cordelia's grand estate. A man emerged from the cabin as they approached. He was thin and weathered with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much disappointment. Silas Kane. Edgar's voice was flat. Didn't expect to see you out here. Edgar, we need to talk. About what? About Cordelia. Edgar's expression hardened. That woman's got nothing to do with me. Not anymore. She's trying to take this woman's children. Silas gestured to Clara. Making up lies, buying off judges, sending mobs to burn us out. We need help. And you think I can give it? I think you know things she doesn't want people to know. Edgar was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving from Silas to Clara and back again. You know what she did to me, he said finally. After my brother died, she came to me with papers, said Harold had left everything to her, that I was entitled to nothing. I knew it was a lie. Harold and I were close. He would never have cut me out like that. What did you do? I fought her, hired a lawyer, took it to court, lost everything. Edgar laughed bitterly. The judge ruled in her favor. Same judge who's going to hear your case probably. Patterson. He's been in Cordelia's pocket for years. Clara's heart sank. So there's nothing we can do. I didn't say that. Edgar's eyes gleamed with something that might have been hope. See, after I lost the case I did some digging. Found out some things about how Harold really died. Silas went very still. What kind of things? The kind of things Cordelia would kill to keep quiet. Clara's breath caught. You're saying she... I'm saying my brother was healthy as a horse one day and dead the next. The doctor ruled it heart failure, but Harold never had any heart trouble. He was 42 years old and strong as an ox. Edgar's voice dropped. And 3 weeks before he died, he told me he was planning to change his will, leave most of the estate to me instead of her. That's not proof, Silas said. No, but I know who might have it. Edgar hesitated. There was a maid, Sally Brennan. She worked in the house when Harold died. She saw something that night, something that scared her so bad she fled town the next day. Sally Brennan. Clara's mind raced. Any relation to the sheriff? His sister. The pieces clicked into place. Sheriff Brennan's willingness to warn them. His quiet suggestion to find Cordelia's enemies. He knew something. He'd known all along. Where is she now? Silas asked. Last I heard, she was living in Carson City. changed her name trying to disappear. Edgar shook his head. But if you could find her, convince her to talk. She could testify at the hearing, Clara breathed. She could do more than that. She could destroy Cordelia. They rode back even faster than they'd come. Clara's mind was spinning with everything Edgar had told them. If it was true, if Sally Brennan had witnessed something the night Harold Whitmore died, then Cordelia wasn't just a cruel woman with too much power. She was a murderer. They reached the ranch just as the sun was setting. Elijah met them at the door, his face worried. Mama, someone came while you were gone. Clara's heart stopped. Who? A woman. Said her name was Maggie O'Brien. Said she needed to talk to you. It was urgent. Where is she now? Inside. I told her to wait. Clara pushed past her son and into the house. A woman sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a face lined by hard work and harder decisions. Clara recognized her, the blacksmith's wife, one of the few people in town who had ever shown her any kindness. Mrs. Weston. Maggie rose to her feet. Thank God you're here. Mrs. O'Brien, what? There's no time. Listen to me. Maggie grabbed Clara's hands. I came to warn you. Cordelia isn't waiting for the hearing. What do you mean? I mean she's sent word to the territorial marshal. Claims you kidnapped those children, that you're holding them against their will. She's got men coming, Clara. Real lawmen this time, not just local thugs. They'll be here by tomorrow morning. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. That's impossible. They're my children. I know that. You know that. But Cordelia's got documents. Forged, probably, but they look official. She's claiming she's the children's legal guardian. Says you signed them over to her care before your husband died. That's a lie. Of course it's a lie. But the marshals don't know that. They'll take the children first and ask questions later. Maggie's eyes were bright with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to help, but I didn't know until an hour ago. My husband overheard Webb talking about it at the forge. Silas stepped forward. How many marshals? 4, maybe 5. When exactly? Dawn. Maybe sooner. Clara looked at Silas, at the man who had risked everything for her and her children. We have to run, she whispered. No. Silas, they'll take my children. I said no. His voice was firm, but his eyes were gentle. We're not running. We're not hiding. We're going to fight this the right way. How? Silas turned to Maggie. Mrs. O'Brien, you said your husband heard Webb talking. Would he be willing to testify to that? Maggie hesitated. He's afraid of Cordelia. Are you? Maggie's face crumpled. I'm terrified. But I'm more afraid of what happens if good people don't stand up. She straightened her shoulders. Yes, I'll talk to him. I'll make him understand. Good. We need others. Anyone Cordelia has wronged. Anyone who knows the truth about who she really is. There's more than you'd think, Maggie said slowly. People talk to me. Tell me things they wouldn't tell others. The butcher's wife, the school teacher, the widow Hawkins. Cordelia's hurt a lot of people over the years. Can you gather them tonight? I can try. Then try. Silas walked Maggie to the door. And Mrs. O'Brien, thank you for the warning, for everything. Maggie looked back at Clara, at the children peeking out from the doorway, at the family fighting for their lives. Just don't let her win, she said. For all our sakes, don't let her win. The door closed behind her. Clara stood in the middle of the room, trembling. Silas? What are we going to do? Even if we find witnesses, the marshals will be here before the hearing. They'll take the children. No, they won't. How can you be so sure? Silas walked to her and took her face in his hands. His palms were rough and warm against her cheeks. Because I'm going to Carson City tonight. What? Sally Brennan. She's our best chance. If she saw what Edgar thinks she saw, her testimony could destroy Cordelia. Not just save your children, but end this. All of it. Carson City is 40 miles away. You can't make it there and back before dawn. I can if I ride hard. Silas, no. It's too dangerous. If Cordelia finds out, she won't. And even if she does, I'm not afraid of her. He pressed his forehead against hers. I spent 4 years hiding from the world, Clara. 4 years afraid to feel anything because feeling hurt too much. You changed that. You and those children. Silas, let me do this. Let me fight for something that matters. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to beg him to stay, but she looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Hope. Come back to me, she whispered. I will. I promise. He kissed her forehead, soft and gentle, and then he was gone. Clara stood at the window watching until his horse disappeared into the darkness. Then she turned to face her children who had gathered in the doorway. Mama. Ruth's voice was small. Is Mr. Kane coming back? Clara thought about all the promises that had been broken in her life, all the times she'd been let down by the people she trusted. But Silas was different. Silas kept his word. Yes, baby, she said. He's coming back. She just prayed she was right. Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the window all night watching the darkness, praying for the sound of hoofbeats that would mean Silas had returned. The children slept fitfully upstairs, and twice Ruth came down to check on her, but Clara sent her back each time. Rest, baby. I'll wake you if anything happens. Mama, you should sleep too. I can't, not tonight. The hours crawled by. Midnight, 1 o'clock, 2. At 3 in the morning, Elijah appeared at her side. They're not coming until dawn, he said quietly. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. Mama. Elijah knelt beside her chair. You can't fight if you're weak. That's what Pa always said. Clara looked at her son. When had he grown so tall? When had his voice started to deepen? Your Pa said a lot of things. He was right about that one. Clara almost smiled. Fine, I'll eat, but only if you eat with me. They sat at the kitchen table together, sharing cold biscuits and the last of the bacon. Neither of them spoke much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood each other. Mr. Kane will come back, Elijah said finally. I know he will. How do you know? Because he promised you. And because... Elijah paused, choosing his words carefully. Because of the way he looks at you. Clara's breath caught. Eli, I'm not a child, Mama. I see things. Elijah met her eyes. He loves you. Maybe he hasn't said it yet, but he does. And a man doesn't ride 40 miles in the dead of winter for someone he doesn't love. Clara didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to explain the complicated tangle of feelings in her chest. It's not that simple, she whispered. Why not? Because I'm still scared, Eli. Your father. Pa's gone, Mama. He's been gone for almost 3 years. Elijah's voice was gentle but firm. You're allowed to be happy again. We all are. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks before she could stop them. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you. She pulled him into her arms and held him tight, this boy who had become a man when she wasn't looking. This son who carried so much on his young shoulders. I love you, she whispered. Whatever happens today, I need you to know that. I know, Mama. I've always known. The first light of dawn broke cold and gray. Clara was on her feet instantly, her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see riders approaching, 5 of them, their badges glinting even in the weak morning light. Elijah, wake the children. Get them dressed. Mama? Do it now. Elijah ran upstairs. Clara grabbed her shawl and stepped onto the porch, her chin high, her hands steady, even though her heart was racing. The lead rider pulled his horse to a stop in front of the house. He was a hard-faced man with a graying mustache and eyes that had seen too much. Mrs. Clara Weston. That's me. I'm Marshal Henry Cole, Territorial Authority. I've got papers here authorizing the removal of 7 minor children from your custody. You're to surrender them to us immediately. On what grounds? Abandonment, neglect, and moral unfitness. Cole pulled a folded document from his coat. It's all here signed by Judge Patterson himself. Those papers are lies. That may be, ma'am, but they're legal lies, and that means I've got to enforce them. Cole's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. Now you can make this easy or hard. Either way, we're taking those children. Over my dead body, Cole sighed. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. Marshal Cole. Clara stepped forward, her voice rising. Those children are mine. I gave birth to every one of them. I've fed them, clothed them, loved them their whole lives, and you're telling me some piece of paper signed by a corrupt judge can take them from me. The law is the law, ma'am. Then the law is wrong. Maybe so, but I still have to follow it. The door opened behind Clara. She turned to see her children filing out onto the porch, Ruth in the lead, Grace in her arms. Thomas, Sarah, Benjamin, little Noah, and Elijah standing at the back, his face like stone. These are my children, Clara said, her voice breaking. Look at them. Do they look neglected? Do they look abandoned? Cole's jaw tightened. She could see the conflict in his eyes. Ma'am, I don't make the rules. No, but you choose which ones to follow. Clara's voice was fierce now. You choose to ride out here at dawn to take children from their mother. You choose to believe a rich woman's lies over the truth that's standing right in front of you. That's your choice, Marshal, not the law's. Cole was silent for a long moment. Where's Silas Kane? He asked finally. He's not here. Convenient. Mrs. Whitmore said he might try to hide you. He didn't hide me. He gave me shelter when no one else would. He gave my children food when they were starving. He protected us when the whole town wanted us dead. Clara's voice dropped. Is that what you call a crime, Marshal? Kindness? Before Cole could answer, the sound of approaching horses made everyone turn. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. But it wasn't Silas. It was Cordelia Whitmore. She rode at the head of a small entourage, her face triumphant, her eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction. Marcus Webb flanked her on one side, and a thin, nervous man Clara didn't recognize on the other. Ah, Marshal Cole! Cordelia's voice was honey laced with poison. I see you found our wayward mother. Mrs. Whitmore. Cole's voice was neutral, but Clara caught a flicker of something like disgust in his eyes. You didn't need to come yourself. Oh, but I did. I want to personally ensure that these poor children are removed from this den of sin. Cordelia's gaze swept over Clara, over the children lingering with special venom on Ruth. Look at them. Dirty, frightened, clinging to a woman who can't even feed them properly. It's heartbreaking, really. We're not dirty, Thomas said, his young voice cutting through the air. And Mama feeds us just fine. Hush, child. Adults are talking. Don't you talk to my brother like that. Ruth stepped forward, her eyes blazing. You're a liar, and everyone knows it. Cordelia's face went white, then red. You see, Marshal, this is what I mean. These children have been raised without discipline, without proper guidance. They need structure. They need their mother. The voice came from the edge of the yard. Everyone turned. Sheriff Brennan stood there, his badge gleaming, his hand resting on his holster. Behind him stood a small crowd of townspeople, Maggie O'Brien and her husband Jeb Hawkins, the schoolteacher Miss Clement, and at least a dozen others. Sheriff, Cordelia's voice was sharp. What are you doing here? My job. Brennan walked forward until he stood between Clara and the marshals. Marshal Cole, I'm asking you to hold off on this order. On what grounds? On the grounds that the woman who filed these complaints is a fraud, a thief, and quite possibly a murderer. The crowd gasped. Cordelia's face drained of color. How dare you? I dare because I'm tired. Brennan's voice was weary but steady. Tired of watching you destroy good people. Tired of looking the other way while you buy and sell this town like it's your personal property. Tired of the lies, Cordelia. You work for me. No, ma'am. I work for the people of Silver Creek. And they're standing right here ready to testify against you." Cordelia's eyes swept over the crowd, and for the first time Clara saw fear in them. This is absurd. These people are nobodies. Their testimony means nothing. Maybe so, but mine does. A woman stepped forward from the back of the crowd. She was perhaps 30 with light brown hair and nervous eyes, but her voice was steady. Clara didn't recognize her, but Cordelia clearly did. "Sally?" The word came out strangled. "You're supposed to be gone dead." Sally's laugh was bitter. "Sorry to disappoint you." "Marshal Cole." Sheriff Brennan's voice rang out. "This is Sally Brennan, my sister. She worked as a maid in the Whitmore household when Harold Whitmore died 4 years ago." "She's a liar," Cordelia hissed. "A disgruntled servant with a grudge? I saw what you did." Sally's voice cut through Cordelia's protests like a blade. "I saw you put the poison in his tea. I saw you stand over him while he died. I saw you burn his real will, the one that left everything to his brother." The silence was absolute. That's ridiculous." Cordelia's voice was shaking now. "You can't prove any of that." "Can't I?" Sally reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "You should have burned this too, Mrs. Whitmore. But you were in such a hurry to get rid of Harold's body, you missed it." She handed the paper to Marshal Cole. Cole unfolded it, his face growing grimmer with every line he read. "What is that?" Cordelia demanded. "Let me see." "It's a letter." Cole's voice was hard. "Written by Harold Whitmore to his brother Edgar, dated 3 days before his death. It says, and I quote, 'Cordelia has become increasingly unstable. I fear for my safety. If anything happens to me, investigate her first.'" "That's a forgery. It has to be. It's in his handwriting, Cordelia." Edgar Whitmore pushed through the crowd, his face gray but determined. "I'd know my brother's hand anywhere, and I've got samples to prove it." Cordelia stumbled backward, her face ashen. "This is a conspiracy. You're all conspiring against me." "No, ma'am." Marshal Cole folded the letter and tucked it into his coat. "This is justice." He turned to his men. "Boys, forget about the children. We've got a different arrest to make today." "You can't do this." Cordelia's voice rose to a shriek. "Do you know who I am? I own this town. I own the judge, the bank, You don't own me." Cole stepped forward, his hand on his cuffs. "Cordelia Whitmore, you're under arrest for the murder of Harold Whitmore and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to—" "No." Cordelia lunged for the nearest horse, but Marcus Webb grabbed her arm. "Let me go, you fool." Webb's face was expressionless. "Sorry, Mrs. Whitmore. I ain't going down for your crimes. I pay you. Not enough for this." Cole cuffed her hands behind her back. Cordelia was screaming now, a high, thin sound like a wounded animal. "This isn't over. I have money. I have lawyers. I'll destroy all of you." "Take her away," Cole said wearily. 2 marshals dragged Cordelia toward the horses. Her screams echoed across the yard as they lifted her onto a horse and rode away. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara stood frozen, unable to believe what had just happened. Her children gathered around her, their faces stunned. "Mama?" Grace tugged at her skirt. "Is the mean lady gone?" "Yes, baby." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "She's gone. Forever." Clara looked at Marshal Cole, who nodded slowly. "Forever." The crowd began to disperse, people murmuring to each other, casting glances back at Clara and the children. Some faces held sympathy, others shame. Maggie O'Brien approached, her eyes bright with tears. "It's over, Clara. It's really over." "I can't believe—" Clara shook her head. "How did Sally—" "Ask him." Maggie nodded toward the road. Clara turned. Silas Kane was riding toward them, his horse lathered with sweat, his face haggard but triumphant. Behind him rode another figure, smaller, wrapped in a heavy coat. Clara's legs gave out. Silas was off his horse before it fully stopped catching her in his arms, holding her up when she couldn't hold herself. "I'm here," he murmured against her hair. "I told you I'd come back." "You found her. You actually found her." "She didn't want to come at first. Took some convincing." Silas pulled back his hands, cupping her face. "But when I told her about you, about the children, about what Cordelia was trying to do..." He shook his head. "She said it was time to stop running." Clara looked past him to Sally Brennan, who was being embraced by her brother, both of them crying. "She saved us," Clara whispered. "She saved my children." "No." Silas's voice was firm. "You saved them. You kept them alive. You kept them together. All I did was ride a horse." Clara laughed, and it came out half a sob. "Mama." She turned to see her children rushing toward her, all 7 of them, their faces bright with joy and relief. They crashed into her and Silas together, a tangle of arms and laughter and tears. "Is it really over?" Elijah asked. "It's really over," Clara said. "And Mr. Kane..." Ruth looked up at Silas, her eyes suddenly shy. Is he staying?" Silas looked at Clara, a question in his eyes. Clara thought about everything she had lost. Her husband, her home, her dignity, her hope. Then she thought about everything she had found. This man who had risked everything for her. These people who had stood up when it mattered. This family she had fought so hard to keep together. "That's up to him," she said softly. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the children. "I've been alone for a long time," he said. "Thought that's how I wanted it. Thought I was better off without anyone to care about." He looked at each child in turn, ending with Clara. "I was wrong. I've never been more wrong about anything in my life." "Does that mean you're staying?" Benjamin asked. Silas smiled, and Clara realized she had never seen him truly smile before. It transformed his whole face. "If your mama will have me," he said, "and if you all will have me, I'd like to stay. Not just as your employer, Clara, but as..." He paused, struggling for the words. "As something more. If you'll let me." The children all looked at Clara. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. This wasn't the life she had planned. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the best things in life were the ones you never planned for. "Silas Kane," she said, her voice trembling. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I reckon I am. In front of all these people, in front of my children." Seemed like the right place for it. Clara laughed again, tears streaming down her face. "Then yes. Yes, I'll have you. Yes, my children will have you. Yes to all of it." The cheer that went up from the crowd was deafening. The children were jumping up and down, shouting with joy. Even Ruth, usually so reserved, was grinning from ear to ear. Silas stood and pulled Clara into his arms. "I should warn you," he murmured. "I'm not an easy man to live with. Neither am I. I snore. I talk in my sleep. I've got a temper. So do I." Clara pulled back to look at him, this man who had become her whole world. "We'll figure it out. Together." "Together," Silas agreed. And right there in front of God and the whole town, he kissed her. The celebration lasted well into the afternoon. People came from all over Silver Creek, bringing food and well wishes and apologies. Some Clara accepted gracefully. Others she simply nodded at and moved on. She wasn't ready to forgive everyone, not yet. But she was ready to try. As the sun began to set, she found herself standing by the oak tree where Sarah and the baby were buried. Silas's first family. The family he had lost. She heard his footsteps behind her. "You don't have to stand out here in the cold," he said. "I know. I just—" Clara touched the simple wooden cross. "I wanted to thank her." Silas came to stand beside her. "Thank her. For loving you. For making you the man you are. If she hadn't—" Clara's voice caught. "If she hadn't been part of your life, you wouldn't be who you are. And who you are is the reason my children are safe." Silas was silent for a long moment. "She would have liked you," he said finally. "Sarah." She had a soft spot for stubborn women. Clara smiled through her tears. "I would have liked her too." They stood there together as the last light faded, two people who had lost everything and found each other in the wreckage. "Silas," Clara said quietly. "Yeah, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Clara hadn't meant to say it, not like this, not now. But somehow it felt right. Silas went very still. "You're... what?" "I found out 3 weeks ago, before everything happened." Clara's voice was trembling. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know if—" He pulled her into his arms so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." She felt his shoulders shake and realized he was crying. This strong, stoic man who had faced down mobs and marshals and murderers was crying in her arms. "Silas, I thought I'd never have this again." His voice was raw. "I thought that part of my life was over." "It's not over. It's just beginning." He pulled back to look at her, his face wet with tears, but lit up with a joy she had never seen before. "8 children," he said. "We're going to have 8 children. You sure you can handle that?" "Clara Weston, I can handle anything as long as you're beside me." She laughed and kissed him again, and somewhere in the distance she heard her children cheering. This was her life now. This man, these children, this family they were building together. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what she had planned, but it was hers, and that made it everything. The weeks that followed were the happiest Clara had ever known. Cordelia Whitmore was transported to the territorial prison to await trial. Judge Patterson, facing his own investigation, resigned in disgrace. And the people of Silver Creek, freed from the shadow that had hung over them for so long, began to remember what it meant to be a community. But Clara didn't care much about any of that. She cared about the way Silas smiled when he came in for breakfast. She cared about the sound of her children laughing as they chased each other through the snow. She cared about the life growing inside her, the promise of something new. "You're glowing," Ruth said one morning. Clara laughed. "I'm exhausted is what I am." "Same thing according to Mrs. O'Brien." Ruth grinned. "She says pregnant women always glow." "Mrs. O'Brien says a lot of things." "She also says you and Mr. Kane should get married before the baby comes." Ruth's voice was carefully casual. "Says it wouldn't be proper otherwise." Clara stopped stirring the porridge. "Did she now?" She's not the only one. Half the town's been talking about it." "The town can mind its own business." "They're not being mean about it, Mama. They're excited." Ruth came to stand beside her. "They want to celebrate. After everything that happened, they want something good." Clara was quiet for a moment. The truth was, she and Silas had talked about marriage. Late at night, lying together by the fire, they had whispered about the future. But neither of them had wanted to rush. Neither of them had wanted to jinx what they had found. "Mr. Kane hasn't asked me properly," Clara said finally. "Maybe he's waiting for the right moment. Maybe. Or maybe he needs a push." Ruth's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Want me to talk to him?" "Ruth Weston, don't you dare!" But Ruth was already out the door laughing. Clara sighed and went back to stirring. Her daughter was too clever by half, just like her father had been. The thought of Daniel didn't hurt the way it used to. The grief was still there, would probably always be there, but it had softened into something gentler. A memory instead of a wound. "Morning." Clara turned. Silas stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, his face ruddy from the cold. "Morning yourself. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." He crossed to the stove and poured himself a cup of coffee. "Mine's been racing." "About what?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his cup and turned to face her. "Ruth just cornered me in the barn." Clara's cheeks flushed. "I told her not to." "She asked when I was planning to make an honest woman of you." Silas's mouth twitched. "Those were her exact words. I'm going to kill that girl." "She's not wrong, though." Silas stepped closer. "I've been meaning to ask. Just never seemed like the right time." Silas. "Let me finish." He took her hands in his. "I know this ain't traditional. I know we haven't known each other long. But Clara, I've lived more in these past weeks than I have in the last 4 years. You and those children, you've given me a reason to wake up in the morning. A reason to keep going." His voice roughened. "I don't want to waste another day. Not one more day without calling you my wife." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Are you asking me to marry you, Silas Kane?" "I'm begging you to marry me." She laughed, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Then yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your wife. Yes to everything." Silas pulled her into his arms and kissed her deep and slow, and when they finally broke apart, they found 7 children standing in the doorway, watching with varying expressions of joy and disgust. "Are you two done being mushy?" Benjamin asked. "Not even close," Silas said. "Better get used to it." The children groaned, but Clara could see the happiness in their eyes. Even Elijah, who had been the most suspicious of Silas in the beginning, was grinning. "So when's the wedding?" Thomas asked. Clara looked at Silas. "How about Christmas?" she said. "It's only a week away." "Christmas," Silas repeated. "I like that. Can we have cake?" Grace tugged at Clara's skirt. "We can have all the cake you want." The children cheered. And just like that, they had a wedding to plan. The next week was chaos. Word spread through Silver Creek like wildfire, and suddenly everyone wanted to help. Maggie O'Brien took charge of the decorations. Miss Clement offered to play the piano. Even Jeb Hawkins, who had once refused to give Clara credit, donated a barrel of his best cider. "People are strange," Clara said to Silas one evening. "Half of them wouldn't spit on me a month ago. Now they're falling over themselves to be generous." "People follow leaders," Silas said. "Cordelia taught them to be cruel. Now that she's gone, they're learning to be kind again." "You really believe that?" "I believe people can change. I did." Clara thought about that. Thought about the man Silas had been when she first met him, cold and isolated and half dead inside. Thought about the man he was now playing with her children, laughing at the dinner table, planning a future he had never expected to have. "Yes," she said softly. "You did." The morning of Christmas Eve dawned bright and cold. Clara woke to the sound of Ruth and Sarah giggling in the hallway and the smell of fresh bread from the kitchen. Someone, probably Elijah, had already stoked the fire. She lay there for a moment, savoring the warmth, the peace. Today she was getting married. The thought still seemed impossible. 3 months ago she had been begging for scraps in the town square, watching her children starve, seeing no future at all. And now? "Mama." Ruth poked her head through the door. "Time to get up. Mrs. O'Brien's here with your dress." Clara sat up. "My dress." "She wouldn't tell us anything. Said it's a surprise." Clara dressed quickly and went downstairs where Maggie O'Brien was waiting with a large wrapped package in her arms. "This was mine," Maggie said, her eyes bright. "My mother made it for my wedding 20 years ago. It's been sitting in a trunk ever since, just waiting for someone to wear it." Clara unwrapped the package with trembling hands. The dress was beautiful. Simple white cotton, with delicate lace at the collar, and cuffs, elegant without being showy. The kind of dress a frontier woman would wear to marry the man she loved. "Maggie, I can't." "You can, and you will." Maggie squeezed her hands. You've given this town something it hasn't had in years, Clara. Hope. Let us give you something back. Clara hugged her, too overcome to speak. The ceremony was held at noon. Silas stood under the oak tree where Sarah and the baby were buried, and at first Clara had thought it was strange. But then she understood. He wasn't leaving his past behind. He was bringing her into it, making her part of everything he had been and everything he was going to be. The whole town had turned out. They stood in a wide circle around the tree, their faces solemn and joyful all at once. Clara walked toward Silas with Elijah on one side and Ruth on the other. The younger children followed behind Grace, scattering flower petals she had dried herself. When she reached Silas, he took her hands. You look beautiful, he said, his voice rough. You clean up pretty good yourself. He laughed, and the sound broke the tension. The crowd relaxed. This wasn't a funeral. It was a celebration. Reverend Thomas, the new minister who had replaced the old one after Cordelia's arrest, stepped forward with his Bible. Dearly beloved, he began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Silas Jeremiah Kane and Clara Jane Weston. Clara barely heard the words that followed. She was too busy looking at Silas, at his eyes that held hers with such tenderness, at his hands that gripped hers with such strength. Do you, Silas, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Clara, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you man and wife. Reverend Thomas smiled. You may kiss the bride. Silas pulled her close and kissed her, and the crowd erupted in cheers. When they finally broke apart, Clara turned to find her children watching with shining eyes. Well, she said, don't just stand there. Come here. They rushed into her arms, all 7 of them at once, nearly knocking her off her feet. Silas steadied her with one hand while wrapping his other arm around as many children as he could reach. Mr. Kane. Benjamin's voice was muffled against Clara's skirt. Yeah. Can we call you Pa now? The silence that followed was absolute. Clara felt Silas go very still beside her. She looked up at his face and saw something there she had never seen before. A raw, naked vulnerability that made her heart ache. Yeah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You can call me Pa. Benjamin's face split into a grin. Pa, 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 pa. The other children took up the chant, even Ruth, even Elijah, and suddenly Silas was surrounded by 7 children, all calling him Pa, all claiming him as their own. He dropped to his knees in the snow and pulled them all close. My children, he said, and his voice broke on the words. My family. Clara stood there watching her husband hold her children and felt something shift inside her. The last piece of a puzzle falling into place. The final note of a song she hadn't known she was singing. This was home. This was where she belonged. The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was food and music and dancing. The children ran wild with their new friends, and the adults laughed and told stories and toasted the happy couple until their cups ran dry. But as the night wore on, Clara found herself drifting away from the crowd. She stood by the window of the ranch house, looking out at the snow-covered land that was now her home. Penny, for your thoughts. She turned. Silas stood behind her, 2 cups of cider in his hands. Just thinking. About what? About how strange life is. Clara took the cup he offered. 3 months ago, I wanted to die. I thought about it, you know. Standing in that square, watching my children starve, I thought about how easy it would be to just give up. But you didn't. No. Because of them. Because they needed me. She shook her head. I never imagined I'd end up here. Married, happy, expecting another child. Silas set down his cup and pulled her close. I know what you mean, he said quietly. After Sarah died, I spent 4 years waiting to follow her. Every morning I woke up disappointed that I was still breathing. And now I wake up grateful. He pressed his forehead against hers. You saved my life, Clara. You and those children. You gave me something to live for again. We saved each other. I reckon we did. They stood there in the quiet, holding each other while outside the celebration continued without them. Silas. Yeah. Take me to bed. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes dark with promise. Yes, ma'am. The months that followed were the sweetest Clara had ever known. Spring came melting the snow and bringing new life to the land. The children adjusted to their new home, to their new father, to the idea that they were finally truly safe. Elijah took to ranching like he was born to it. Silas taught him everything patient and thorough, and Clara watched her son transform from a boy carrying too much weight into a young man with a purpose. Ruth became the unofficial mother of the household, bossing her siblings around with cheerful efficiency and keeping Clara off her feet as her pregnancy progressed. Thomas discovered a love of reading that Silas encouraged, bringing home books from town whenever he could. Sarah and Benjamin became inseparable, their constant bickering a source of both exasperation and amusement. And little Grace, who had been so quiet and frightened when they first arrived, bloomed into a chatterbox who followed Silas everywhere, calling him "my pa" with possessive pride. Baby Noah, now walking and talking, called Silas Papa before he called Clara Mama, which she pretended to be offended by but secretly loved. You've got a way with children, she told Silas one evening. I've got a way with your children, he corrected. They're special. They're exhausting. That too. Clara laughed and Silas pulled her close, his hand resting on her swollen belly. Not long now, he said. Another month maybe. The baby's been kicking up a storm. Active? That's good. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being used as a punching bag. Silas grinned. Want me to have a talk with him? Tell him to settle down. Him? How do you know it's a boy? Just a feeling. Clara shook her head, but she was smiling. What if it's a girl? Then I'll have another princess to spoil. Silas kissed her forehead. Either way, I win. The baby came on a warm spring night. Clara had been restless all day, unable to sit still, unable to focus. She had dismissed it as nerves until the first contraction hit, and she realized this was it. Silas. He burst through the door, his face white with panic. Is it time? Is it happening? What do I do? Get Maggie and the doctor, and stop looking at me like I'm dying. You're not dying. You're definitely not dying. Are you dying? Silas. He ran. The labor was long and hard, harder than any of Clara's previous births. By the time Maggie and the doctor arrived, she was drenched in sweat, clutching the bedsheets with white-knuckled hands. You're doing fine, Maggie said, dabbing her forehead with a cool cloth. Just breathe. I am breathing, Clara gasped. It still hurts. That's how you know it's working. The hours crawled by. Outside, Clara could hear the children's worried voices, Ruth trying to keep them calm, Elijah pacing on the porch, and Silas. Silas, who had lost his first wife in childbirth. Silas, who had buried his son before ever holding him. Silas, who was living his worst nightmare all over again. Let him in, Clara said between contractions. Maggie hesitated. Clara, it's not customary. I don't care about custom. Let him in. Maggie went to the door, and a moment later Silas was at Clara's side, his face gray, his hands trembling. I'm here, he said. I'm right here. I know. Clara grabbed his hand. I'm not leaving you, Silas. Do you hear me? I'm not going anywhere. Clara. Say it back. Tell me you believe me. He swallowed hard. I believe you. Good. Now hold my hand and don't let go. Never. The next contraction hit, and Clara screamed. It went on forever. The pain, the pushing, the endless waiting. Clara lost track of time, lost track of everything except Silas's hand in hers, and the sound of his voice telling her she was strong, she was brave, she could do this. And then finally a different sound. A baby's cry. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. "A healthy baby boy." Clara sobbed with relief as Maggie placed the baby in her arms. He was perfect. Red-faced and screaming and absolutely perfect. She looked up at Silas. His face was wet with tears, his eyes fixed on the baby with an expression of wonder so pure it made Clara's heart ache. "Our son," she whispered. "Our son Silas." He reached out with a trembling hand and touched the baby's cheek. "He's beautiful. He's got your nose." Silas laughed a broken sound that was half sob. Poor kid. The door burst open, and 7 children tumbled into the room, unable to wait any longer. "Is Mama okay? Is the baby here? Can we see? Is it a boy or a girl?" Clara smiled at her family, her beautiful, chaotic, perfect family. "Everyone meet your new brother." The children crowded around their faces, alight with joy. "What's his name?" Ruth asked. Clara looked at Silas. They had discussed names for months, unable to agree on anything. But now, looking at this new life they had created together, Clara knew exactly what he should be called. "Daniel," she said softly. "Daniel Silas Kane, after the 2 best men I've ever known." Silas's breath caught. "Clara, you don't have to." "I want to." She reached up to touch his face. "Daniel gave me these children. You gave me this life. Our son should carry both of you with him." Silas leaned down and kissed her soft and reverent. "Daniel," he repeated. "Daniel Silas Kane." "Danny," Grace announced. "His name is Danny." "Danny," the other children echoed. And just like that, the newest member of the Kane family had a name. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed and the house had finally fallen quiet, Clara lay in Silas's arms, baby Danny sleeping between them. "What are you thinking?" Silas asked. "I'm thinking about how far we've come." Clara traced patterns on his chest. "A year ago I was a widow with 7 hungry children and no hope. Now look at us. A year ago, I was a ghost haunting my own house." Silas's arm tightened around her. "Now I have a wife, 8 children, and a reason to live." 9. "What?" Clara smiled. "You forgot Sarah's baby. The one buried under the oak tree. He's still your son Silas. He always will be." Silas was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "You really think of him that way? As part of our family?" "Of course I do. He's Danny's brother. He's part of you, which means he's part of all of us." Silas pulled her closer, and Clara felt the wetness of his tears against her hair. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed softly, and the sound was full of love. They lay there in the darkness, the 3 of them, while outside the spring wind whispered through the grass and the stars wheeled overhead. "Clara. Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For finding me. For saving me. For giving me this life." Clara lifted her head to look at him. This man who had become her whole world. "You saved me first," she said. "That day in the square when you told me to climb into the wagon. You saved me when no one else would. I just did what was right. No, you did what was extraordinary, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for it." Silas kissed her long and slow, and when they broke apart, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home. Not a place, not a house, a person, a family, a love that had been forged in fire and would last forever. The next morning, Clara stood on the porch of her home watching her children play in the spring sunshine. Ruth was teaching Grace how to make flower crowns. Thomas was reading under a tree. Sarah and Benjamin were chasing each other through the grass. Elijah was helping Silas mend a fence, the two of them working in easy silence. And in her arms, baby Danny slept peacefully, his tiny fist curled against her chest. She thought about the woman she had been. The woman who had begged for scraps, who had been spat upon, who had believed she would never be happy again. That woman was gone. In her place stood Clara Kane, wife, mother, survivor. Silas looked up from his work and caught her eye. He smiled, and Clara smiled back. They had been through fire and come out stronger. They had faced hatred and responded with love. They had lost everything and found something better. This was their story, their legacy. And it was only just beginning. Because in the end, Clara understood the truth that had taken her so long to learn. Love wasn't something you fell into. It was something you built day by day, choice by choice, through every storm and every sunrise. And she had built something beautiful. She had built a family. She had built a home. She had built a life worth living. And no one, not Cordelia, not the town, not the whole world, could ever take that away from her. The woman they had spat upon in the square was gone. In her place stood a queen surrounded by her kingdom, ready for whatever came next.